this video, we're going to take what we learned about layers and apply it to a pre-existing image. We're going to take a photograph that is already compositionally a grid, and we're going to cut each of those squares out, place them on their own layer, and then move them around to change the arrangement of the composition. To do this, we're going to be using some selection tools. Now, selection tools are a really important part of working in any photographic composition. They allow us to highlight or section off an area of an image, so we're only working within that selection. Now, how we make our selections is quite a long list. There are some really basic selection tools that create basic shapes, like the rectangular Marque tool that we're going to use today, or circular shapes. There are smart selection tools as well, which make selections based on color and contrast. And then there are tools such as the pen tool that allow us to create incredibly detailed and accurate selections of irregular shaped objects. Now, we're not going to cover all of these in this video. We're going to cover the basic core selection tools, such as the rectangular Marque tool, the Polygonal select tool, and some of the other shaped selection tools as well. So let's get started. We're going to start by opening an image, and we do that by going to the File drop-down menu and selecting Open. And I'm going to use this image here. Now, when we're working in an image, it will bring it open either at a scaled size or at 100% if it can fit. And we can zoom in or out of our digital images so we can see more clearly what we're working on. There's no point working on a small part tiny on a screen where we can zoom in to make it larger and easier to work with. The shortcut keys for zooming in and out on a Mac are the Command key and the plus key, or the minus key to zoom in and out. On a PC, it's exactly the same, we just use Control. Now, already we can see that this image is a grid. So we've got our squares that we're going to cut off of the background layer, place them on a higher layer, then we can rearrange the order. The first tool we're going to use to do this with is the rectangular Marque tool. Now, this tool is up here, and if we select that, I can click and drag over an area, and when I let go, that line of marching ants is my selection. Now, when I have something selected, I can only edit what is inside that selection. Everything external to that selection is protected. I can demonstrate that with the paintbrush. I can't paint outside of the selection. I can paint over and do whatever I want within the selection, but as soon as I pass outside, it won't work. So everything inside that selection is protected. If I take my Move tool, I can cut and move around what is within that selection, but it keeps it in the same layer. So if I was to let go now and deselect, then you will see that that is now moved, but it's obscuring what was previously there. It's keeping the edit within the same layer. So I'm going back to my history, go back to where it was, and that's not what we want to do. I want to copy or cut this out of the existing layer and paste it onto a higher layer. So how do we do that? Well, quite simply, we just use the edit, copy and paste functions that you'll be familiar with from Word or pretty much any other word processor. I can go to my Edit drop-down menu, and you will find Cut and Copy. Copy will duplicate what's there, Cut will remove. So let's select Cut. And you will now see that what was within the selection has disappeared. If I go back to my Edit drop-down menu and select Paste, it has appeared in the center of my composition, but it has also appeared as a new layer. So I can select that layer, select my Move tool, and I can move it to anywhere I want within my canvas. So let's try that again. I will start by selecting the layer I want to edit, which is my background layer. I'm going to take my Marque tool. I will click and drag to select the portion I want. And this time I'm going to select copy. So I can go edit, copy. And I will go edit, paste. And I'll get an additional new layer, but because I didn't cut, I didn't remove what was there, I just duplicated what was on the original layer. So I now essentially have two of that square. I have, in essence, duplicated it. Now these layers I can adjust and edit in the exact same way as I could with the layers in the previous video. I can use the eye tool to make them visible or invisible. I can select them and use the padlock tool to lock them to prevent any edits being made to them if I want to protect them, happy with where that layer is. And if I want to delete them, I can find down in here the little trash can to delete layer. I can select that and delete the layer that I have highlighted. Let's have a look at the Marque tool in a little bit more detail. If I have it selected and I drag over an area, but I don't make the full selection, I can add to that selection and I can subtract from that selection. To add to any selection, if I hold down the Shift key, I will get a plus symbol next to my cursor, and then any additional areas I select will be added to my existing selection. If I hold down the Alt key, I get the reverse. I get a minus, and any adjustments I make, any additional selections I create will be minused or reduced from my original selection. So if I hold down the Shift key here, I get my plus sign, and I can add more parts to my selection. But you see again, I've not been very careful, and I've selected parts of some of the neighboring squares. So I hold down my Alt key, I get minus, and I can drag around and reduce my original selection so it only includes the parts that I want. And from doing this, you will have seen that a selection does not have to be a regular shape. It can be an irregular shape, it can be circular, it can be any shape we want. The tool dictates the shape based on how we create that selection. To deselect any area, simply click off of it with one of the selection tools and it will disappear. If you need to make an accurate selection, for example a perfect square or a perfect circle, we simply hold down the Shift key when drawing it out, and that will lock its proportions to a perfect square. If I let go, it will jump to whatever I've dragged to. If I hold down Shift, it will jump back. Let's have a look at some of the other selection tools. Let's start with the ellipse. The ellipse creates circular or oval shaped selections. It can be found where the rectangular Marque tool is. Now any tool in all of the Adobe software, if there's a small triangle in the bottom corner of that tool in the toolbar, it means there are other similar tools nested beneath it. So if I click and hold, it'll expand out and give me more options. So in this instance, I'm going to select the elliptical Marque tool. And the elliptical Marque tool, as it suggests, works in the exact same way as the rectangular one. I click and drag my mouse and I can create ellipses. And if I hold down my Shift key, it will create a perfect circle. So in this instance, I'm going to ensure layer 2 is selected as it has this circular object. I'm going to hold down my Shift key. I'm going to drag out a circle that is roughly the right size. I'm going to drag it over the object and I'm going to go edit, copy, edit, paste. Now I have this new layer with that object so I can place that elsewhere within the composition. Other selection tools that are really useful are things like the Polygonal selection tool. This allows us to create an irregular shape based on hard points that are joined together. It's very straight edged, it's very polygonal, but it is still a very useful tool. It can be found here beneath the rectangular and elliptical selection tools. So I'll select that, and I'll find a portion of my image that has the kind of shape I'm looking for. And I can click, and I get this line that I can drag out. I can drag it at any point, and I click again, and it'll lock to that place. I can drag to my next point, and I can do this working round back to the start. And when I reach the start, you'll see that a little circle appears next to my cursor. This lets us know that we've finished the loop. And if I click there and then get my line of marching ants, and I've made my selection. So I've made my selection, I'm now ready to copy and paste. So I ensure I have the correct layer selected, which in this instance is this top layer here. And I can go to my Edit drop-down menu and select Copy and Paste. I'm now going to make some adjustments, because so far everything I've copied and pasted has remained the same size, the original scale and position and rotation. I've just moved it around the canvas. So we're now going to resize something and rotate it. We find all of these adjustments in the Edit drop-down menu. With my layer selected, I go to the Edit drop-down menu and I come down until I find Transform. Here I find various options from Scale, Rotate, Skew and Distort. Today we're only going to be looking at Scale and Rotate. If we select Scale, a bounding box will appear around the visual information on that layer. If I click and drag, I can scale up and I can scale down. I can skew in any way I want, but if I hold down the Shift key, it will lock it in proportion, so I will scale it without it getting squished, essentially. Now with all digital imagery, if we scale down, not a problem. But if we scale up, we degrade the image quality. When we scale up, we spread the pixels apart, and that leaves gaps. And the software then has to guess what would fill those gaps, and this is called interpolation. And generally it does a pretty poor job of it. We've all had situations where we've taken images off of Google Images and printed them out, and they've looked very blurry and pixelated. That's because these images were scaled for the web, not for print. And as soon as you scale an image up, we create the same effect. So we always want to try and avoid upscaling images, even small parts. So I'll bring it over, and I'll hit return, and it will lock that edit in place. Now let's look at rotate. The rotate works in the exact same fashion. The only difference is it will rotate an image based on a central point. If I go to the Edit drop-down menu again, I'll select Transform, Rotate, and I'll get my bounding box. When I bring my cursor to the edge, I get this arrow, double-headed arrow symbol that allows me to rotate it on a point. Holding on the Shift key allows me to do it in precise degrees, 90, 75, 60, 45, around the clock. And you'll notice that this is all rotating around this central point. This point is the anchor point. Imagine it's a pin stuck in the middle of that layer and you're just pivoting on that pin. Now we can move that pin, and that can be really useful sometimes. If I bring my cursor over it, I can change it to a different point, and then it'll pivot on that point. So I can move something to get it just right, place the anchor point, and then rotate it appropriately. And just like with the scale, when we've finished making this edit, we hit the return key to complete that edit. I'm going to use the Polygonal selection tool once more, and I'm going to delete something this time. I'm also going to invert our selection. So let's see what that does. Let's have a look at the work we just did here. Now this shape is not this shape. So what I'm going to do is hide this layer, take my Polygonal selection tool, make a rough selection of this viewfinder on this old camera. I'm then going to bring this layer back so it's visible. And I'm going to press the delete key. But wait, as we know, any edit we make will affect what is inside a selection. So pressing delete now will delete the inside of that selection, removing the portion we want to keep. We want to cut out all the stuff around the hand holding the bust. So it looks like that this image is on the viewfinder of the camera. So let's undo and think about the next step. We want to delete what's around the edge. To do this, we're going to invert the selection. To do that, we go to the Select drop-down menu and you will find Inverse. We select Inverse and you'll see that this marching ant line now goes to the very edge of the canvas. That means that this little aperture in the middle is a hole not selected. So if I press delete now, it will remove everything apart from what was within our original selection. That concludes this video of basic selections and layers. Make sure you complete the exercise yourself and move around all of the frames within the image to a different part of the screen. Also think about other parts of the image you can cut out and move from one frame to the other using the other selection tools. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.